I'm going to be talking about AI, and my research concerns for a long time have been to do with environmental issues. But I've noticed that people have been hedging around the question of AI during this conference, perhaps understandably so, because AI hasn't had a good press, recently, because, tech bros and the planet burning and data centers and all that. So I've written lots of critical things about AI, but I'm coming at it now from a slightly different angle, in the sense that the time of just saying no to AI has passed. So I'm trying to find a different mode of engaging with it that goes beyond just, let's either pretend it's not happening or wish it away, because neither of these is going to work, basically. So to speak of bio-AI is to acknowledge that AI hasn't merely positioned itself as an external computational tool operating in the service of human intelligence, but that it has become embedded in the very conditions of life itself. From the algorithmic mediation of our techno-social infrastructures to the increasing incursion into our bodies and minds, AI is actively shaping what it means to live, to perceive, and to know. In its capacity for pattern recognition, decision-making, and some claim understanding, it's also redefining the parameters of life and its processes. The prevailing anxieties surrounding AI, its potential to make human labor obsolete, exceed human cognition, or even bring about planetary distraction, highlight the extent to which this technology is implicated in not just our socio-political, but also our existential concerns. The contemporary techno-social regime can be aptly described with Achille Mbembe's concept of necropolitics, a set of circumstances whereby state and corporate actors determine who is able to live and who must die, while themselves being in charge of the very conditions of habitability and survival. It is in the subjugation of life to the power of death that a supranational power regime is being inaugurated today, according to Mbembe, rooted as it is in the multiple tragedies of racism, slavery, colonialism, and financial capitalism. While Mbembe wasn't writing specifically about AI, his theoretical framework lends itself to analyzing AI's overarching logic and reach. The increasingly automated necropolitical structures that drive the current supranational regime extend from predictive policing to algorithmic governance, surveillance capitalism, and environmental extraction. AI doesn't threaten human autonomy in some dystopian science fictional future. It's modulating planetary and species survival through resource consumption, data extraction, and the reconfiguration of social, economic, and political relations. So my talk positions AI, particularly generative AI, as a phenomenon that both produces and is produced by specific material, ecological, and socio-political entanglements. Using the concept of digital ecologies that offers a framework for researching digitized human, non-human relations, which favors situated understandings of digitization as a material, affective, and plural process, it understands AI as a relational technology of life, a socio-technical system that actively modulates the conditions of existence in its biological and social renditions. To name it bio-AI is to recognize that AI operates as a fundamental infrastructure of life, both a structuring and destabilizing agent within what we might term, with a nod to Gregory Bateson and Felix Guattari, ecologies of the mind and ecologies of the wild. AI participates in the recursive loops of extraction and activation that shape life processes at various scales. Yet, as Turnbull and colleagues argue, from the perspective of digital ecologies, which are always situated and plural, the same technologies which enable ethically questionable practices of digital capture, monitoring, control, and commodification incubate potentials for producing convivial futures. So you can call them, in other words, so I'm going to explore conditions of cohabitability from within the AI-driven socio-political setup. The notion of AI as an unstable, mutative system resonates with a broader understanding of digital ecologies as recursive and self-modifying. Just as biological ecosystems evolve through mutation and adaptation, technological systems too are subject to ongoing processes of rewriting and reconfiguration. We as human users and subjects of these media systems are equally enmeshed in this instability. Our cognitive patterns, perceptual habits, and sensory experiences are continually reshaped by the feedback loops of AI-driven infrastructures. To inhabit this landscape is to recognize ourselves as buggy entities, constantly negotiating the threshold between stability and rupture, between what is determined and what exceeds programmability. Within the context of these hybrid ecologies, the insect or bug will be mobilized in my talk as a polysemic figure of rupture and transformation. I'll show how bugs, be they natural or computational, should such a differentiation even hold, break the binary and heteronormative taxonomy of living organisms with its underlying assumption of belonging, purity, and order. With this, I aim to read the bug as a marker of ecological complexities of not only digital systems, but also those commonly considered natural. The premise of my argument is that all those different types of systems, including AI systems, reveal themselves to be mutually constitutive in contemporary media ecologies, with bugs serving as both generative and disruptive elements within those systems. So AI is a technology of life, but there are bugs in it, which may be a fault, but also an opportunity. That's just a little summary. Okay, a striking activation of AI in the production of hybrid ecologies takes place in immersive installations where the public seems mesmerized by nature, renders as data on high-resolution screens enveloping them. What you are viewing here is an example of the type of work that serves as a reference point for my talk. This is a clip from a show called Works of Nature by London-based collective called Marshmallow Laser Feast, staged at Acme in Melbourne in 23-24. But you can think of a number of other similar shows with a very similar aesthetic. Frameless in London, Borderless in Tokyo. We are looking at a movement of particles on large screens stretching across vast surfaces in an attempt to create an experience of unity between the viewer, the screen, and the data. Often accompanied by a soothing soundtrack, these kinds of video installations aim to create a meditative experience. Featuring synthetically generated nature motifs, they simultaneously erase traces of mediation while pushing through a narrative about a unity of all creation. With works of this nature, often actually featuring images of so-called nature, audiences are being enveloped in what Post-AI Journal of Fine Art recently called pixel dust. These kinds of installations feature moments of data gorgeousness, revealing an expensive obsession with floating pixels, resulting in a flattened, dead aesthetic. While many critics do indeed dismiss such works for their seductive visual hollowness, I want to suggest that those pixel dust installations could be read as staging a digital encounter or experience that demands more than just their aesthetic appreciation or indeed dismissal. Audiences frequently respond to them by being transposed into a semi-meditative state, attuning their moving bodies to the exuberant flow of what look like flowers, plants, and corals unfolding on screens. Making visitors sense their own mediated being, these kinds of works enact what I propose to term data animism, rendering AI as a biomachine that channels life. As anthropologist Catherine Swankard explains, animism is a particular sensibility and way of relating to various beings in the world. It involves attributing sentience to other beings that may include persons, animals, plants, spirits, the environment, or even items of technology, such as cars, robots, or computers. In recent years, animism has been seen as an opening within the over-rationalistic knowledge frameworks of the West. Moving away from the colonial notion of animism as the primitive beliefs of the colonized, animism has served as one of the steps on the path towards decolonization by foregrounding an experiential and relational practice of living between humans and non-humans. For May in Gawajin, there is a strong ethico-political dimension to animist thinking, emerging where lives and habitats have been made precarious and increasingly untenable. Animism returns agency to the powerless, allowing them to imagine and enact the possibility of living, relating, and future-orientating within existentially threatened worlds. It's in the ascription of animist likeness to AI technology and the accompanied felt sensation of their own enhanced vitality in tandem with the AI animations on screen that audiences can trace a passage beyond AI's necropolitical strictures, I suggest. There is a long tradition of interpreting various media in animist terms, with early cinema perceived by many 20th century theorists as possessing a strong capacity to conjure vitalist impulses. Film audiences reacted dramatically to the motion on screen when seeing a locomotive barreling towards them in arrival of a train at La Ciotat by the Lumière brothers. Similarly, in films such as Thomas Edison's Boxing Cats, going to glitch a bit, this one. Movement was central to the cinematic experience, with the film projector repurposing static frames into fluid, lifelike sequences. Early viewers reportedly engaged these illusions in collective corporeal ways, reacting to the movement on screen, moving their bodies in response to that movement, and thus also feeling themselves moved. In this way, early cinema foregrounded movement as an experience of being alive. Camilla Kutz states that films such as Boxing Cats and Skating in Central Park were exercises in capturing life unawares, revealing as they did, to cite Tom Gunning, the magical possibilities of the cinema. All of these films inscribe themselves in the framework of what Gunning has called a cinema of attractions. The unique power of early cinema, we're talking here pre-1906, predominantly pre-narrative, was, according to Gunning, less a way of telling stories than a way of presenting a series of views to an audience. Here we are seeing Georges Méliès's film of Trip to the Moon, supplying pleasure through an exciting spectacle. If movement was the whole point of early cinema, then film's origins clearly lie in unleashing a lifelike motion that was profoundly animist. Read in this context, animism became a framework for capturing and containing not just the delightful horror of the new, but also the sensations evoked in viewers by that novelty. Many 20th century philosophers, from Martin Heidegger in Being and Time to Jean-Paul Sartre in Being and Nothingness, posited that human existence was defined by its forward motion towards its final destiny, a being towards death. Rather than merely affirm finitude, philosophy and art offer us ways of engaging with time as an unfolding continuum. Cinema, in particular, was seen by early 20th century thinkers as enabling an encounter with life's flow, its rhythms and interruptions, its duration and persistence, rather than just its demise. As filmmaker and writer Jean Epstein observed, one of the greatest powers of cinema is its animism. On screen, objects take on airs, trees gesticulate, every prop becomes a character. Since its early days, cinema has been a medium that heightens our awareness of being alive. It not only immerses us in movement, but also situates us within the flux of time, making us acutely aware of duration. Cinema, therefore, could be viewed as an early form of bio-machine. And some of you who are more philosophically minded or film studies minded would have found this argument both in Henri Bergson and in Deleuze. And those who are not, don't worry about it. In the post-COVID era of multi-platform streaming and multiple handheld screens, cinematic experience has become personalized and privatized, while remaining locked to ever-predictable and algorithm-dependent narrative structures. Hollywood cinema continues to move viewers, but it does so emotionally, affectively, through special effects and story-based genre, such as romance or horror. Generative AI seems to have inherited cinema's original biomachinic capacity, crafting enthralling experiences around the pure affect of motion. In AI-based installations, a collective bodily experience resurfaces, with audiences immersed in pixel oceans, which are reminiscent of early film spectators reeling from illusions on screen. Can such artworks generate moments of renewed aesthetic potency? My stance is that we do need a critical perspective on what feeling alive means in these immersive experiences. We do need to question who is included and excluded from such spaces, and to what extent being moved relies on extractive infrastructures or on PR campaign for big tech. Yet those immersive spaces of AI-driven media art might open a horizon for re-engaging with life, time, and movement, especially if we embrace a potential ethical orientation of the projects on offer. Flowers serve as privileged media for exploring AI's capacity to evoke or simulate life. Their ephemeral bloom, hybrid sex, and nature-cultural processes of cultivation and breeding involved in their coming into being make them potent symbols of hybrid ecologies. In his essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin invokes the highly oratic figure of the blue flower, also known as novalis, this unattainable object of romantic quest, as a model for corporeal attunement that can only be felt through technological mediation. Sarah Cooper has proposed the concept of the techno-flower in her discussion of the early British natural history film, The Birth of a Flower by F. Percy Smith, featuring color-tinted time-lapse footage of a variety of flowers seductively opening up to the viewer's gaze. For Cooper, it's not the filmic mediation of nature that is witnessed in the birth of a flower, but the performative constitution of flowers in the land of technology. Flowers seduce people into propagating them, she claims, while film plays a role in fueling desire for their continuing circulation. The reading of the cinematic medium as a life-enhancing technology is driven by on and off screen movement of vegetal and human bodies, of viewers on the other side of the screen moving with the rhythm of the cinematic tape, which is itself in motion, and of the flowers visualizing life processes through the application of the stop-motion technique, which shows them growing and opening up at speed. The animist sensibility of flowers captured on cinematic screens has returned in many immersive Gen AI works. I would now like to turn to 3 such projects which revolve around floral imagery. So first of all, we need to talk about Refik Anadol. For those of you who are not more in the kind of AI world, he's become a poster boy or a bad boy of AI art. So a lot of people hate on Refik Anadol now. So let's go and see what's going on there. Anadol's large-scale installations envelop visitors to galleries, parks, and stadia. He was at Super Bowl, so, not mean feat, with AI-generated data rendered as pixel movement, sprawled on the gallery floor at London Serpentine, undulating in front of his large vertical screen at MoMA, dancing around his installation organized by the Onassis Stegi and held in a park in Athens. Audiences attune their bodies to the exuberant movement of what look like flowers, plants, and corals unfolding on the screen, with pixels seemingly popping out to be touched. His living encyclopedia project visualizes data from various rainforest sites, scanning flora and fauna with LiDAR or photogrammetry to train generative AI models. The concept is visually mesmerizing, yet also somewhat ethically fraught. While viewers find themselves enthralled by the shimmering dance of digitized flowers and fungi, they must at some point reckon with the fact that resource demands, high-powered servers, energy consumption underlie AI's contribution to planetary exploitation. Anadol's emphasis on nature's beauty and complexity ironically depends on industrial-scale computation that relies on non-renewable materials. Would it be unfair to say that the language and logic behind his Echoes of the Earth Living Archive project, shown at Serpentine in 24 and incorporated into the encyclopedia, is akin to carbon offsetting used by big tech? Environmental concerns are not the only issue. Anadol's works are often dismissed by critics as mindless visual seduction, large-scale lava lamps, or screensavers with anesthetic properties. Taking all these criticisms on board, I want to propose that Anadol's works can be seen to be performing something that goes beyond mere extractivist data kitsch. In the mobility of the experience unfolding between the pixel, the data set, the screen infrastructure, the wider environment, and the viewing public, they enact a form of what I earlier called data animism, turning AI into a biomachine that pulsates with life. The concept can help us grasp the contradictory yearnings of the present, a desire for immersive wonder, but also for reconnecting with the living world. Anadol's installations harness the age-old cinematic impulse to re-enchant the everyday, making visible the ungraspable scales of planetary life. This form of pixel kitsch can perhaps challenge conventional aesthetic categories by revealing how thoroughly our sense of being moved is enmeshed today with computational processes. In short, we might glean from his works hints of a technologically mediated animism that shapes their contemporary sensorium. At a time when love and sex have been gamified and datafied via various apps, Anadol's works raise the question as to whether we are even capable of experiencing feelings and sensations outside the machine, and whether it still makes sense to retain such extra-machinic fantasies. Creating experiences of mediated nature through their lush floral arrangements, they remind us that flowers themselves are never just natural. They are also outcomes of complex and increasingly industrialized processes of cultivation, as we will see in the work by Anna Ridler. Anna Ridler's mosaic virus offers an instructive example of this trend. It consists of a collection of videos that embrace the buggy logic of hybrid floral ecologies, but also of the economies within which they function. Adopting the working methods of slow AI, the project involves AI-generated tulips, produced on the basis of the model Ridler created over a period of 1 year by training it on the 10,000 photos of tulips she'd taken and labeled herself. The project's title, Mosaic virus, references the disease that causes the distinctive stripes of flocking in tulip petals. It's caused by aphids laying eggs in the bulbs, meaning that a tulip could produce a pure white flower 1 year and a heavily striped one the next. The element of chance and rarity increased the desirability at the height of tulip mania and helped drive speculation in buying and selling the bulbs. A floral glitch became responsible for a price spike, fueling a speculative bubble around tulips. The shape of the tulip emerging on the screen through multiple iterations of the GAN network in Ridler's work is controlled by the price of Bitcoin, which acts as a virus for the floral unfoldings on the screen, and which is manifested in color markings on the tulip's petals. With this, Ridler establishes a link between the present-day techno-hype around AI and crypto and the 17th century tulip mania, with the price of a tulip bulb, the price of a tulip bulb was close to that of an Amsterdam townhouse before it dropped to that of an onion. The work demonstrates how the flower, as both cultural symbol and biological entity, has long been implicated in capitalist and colonial agendas, and how AI now intensifies these associations. Now, my third kind of example of flower art in AI, Matt Collishaw, British artist, has developed a similar project called Heterosis, where the public is invited to play with a combination of genetic algorithms and blockchain technology to cultivate their own animated digital flowers. Becoming agents of speculation, participants are interpolated to reflect on the idea of collectors as breeders of value. Expanding on the darker potentialities of computational flowers, Collishaw's alluvion integrates insects and AI-generated blossoms in uncanny, Old Master-style paintings, referring to the morphological mimicking seen in nature. Flowers are known to simulate the look of insects to attract other insects to encourage pollination. Yet the artist flips the flower-insect relation in his work. So we're kind of returning to bugs here, flower, insects, bugs. Challenging the cosmeticized image of flowers as pretty, he's interested in foregrounding their predatory and aggressive nature, going so far as to position flowers as competitive breeding machines, beautifully alluring, yet on closer look, also dangerous or even repulsive. Playing with the concept and technique of mimicry, Collishaw issues a darker message. The fact that genetic modification can occur unfavorably due to our meddling presence on the planet, and that practices such as monocultures and industrial-scale intensive agriculture are having deleterious effects on flowers and the insect population. Flowers here serve as indices of the human-induced planetary glitch. So these AI-based floral artworks recall Teresa Castro's notion of the mediated plant, linking them to the broader plant turn across the humanities that emphasizes plants' intelligence, motion, and hybrid modes of reproduction. Castro argues that the scientific in vivo imaging of plant movement unsettles old assumptions about vegetative passivity. In Botany of Empire, Banu Subramaniam discusses how in the 1700s, Swedish biologist Carl Linnaeus transported onto plants European colonial sexual norms based around heterosexual romance, even though more than 85% of flowering plants are hermaphrodite, because their flowers have male and female parts. And that's not to mention all the asexual ways of flowering plants can propagate, such as through roots, stems, leaves, and buds. This perhaps explains why flowers have been of interest to artists across centuries, including those artists who are working with AI. Belonging to both nature and culture, flowers are weird, hybrid, they're literally queer. In their ambiguous ontology, flowers open up an ecological horizon of possibility for those who do not yearn for a pre-technological paradise, and I don't, so. In many science publications, flowers are said to mediate the process of pollination, the entering of the sperm contained within pollen into the ovules. But flowers also activate process of mediation between natural and digital ecologies, not just biological pollination, but also the circulation of technologically shaped desires, illusions, and capital flows. So moving to the almost final part of my talk, which is called Towards Data, Ethical Data Animism. So I'll try to rebuild all of this in a slightly different register. Digital flower ecologies teach us how to engage with modernity's critique of the medium and the technical and social apparatus without falling into the primitivism of animism. The current embrace of animist thinking by many individuals and groups, artists, activists, pan-spiritual gatherings, online communities, can be seen as an attempt to engage with the weird, the unknown, the repressed, and the liminal within the increasingly fractured world, while recuperating some sense of power, agency, and life from that sensation. There is a rationality to the current neo-animist beliefs and behaviors, even though on the surface they might look like escapism and madness. At a time when the certainties of our socioeconomic strategic organization, as well as our trusted modes of knowledge production and reception, have been vaporized by the key political and technocratic players, digital data animism is manifested in phenomena such as the cyber witches of TikTok, AI tarot, or semi-mystical pixel dust art becomes an attempt on the part of increasingly vulnerable humans to establish an alternative space where they can come out on the side of life. Such phenomena are a way of creating glitchy realms of vibrant experience that refuse to be dominated by the seemingly inevitable doom logic of the mainstream narrative, be it coming from the right or left. The exhaustive material demands of the current moment result in a situation whereby people inhabiting all frequencies of the socioeconomic spectrum are intentionally reaching for some of the oldest navigational tools known to humankind, sacred ritual and metaphysical speculation, spiritual regimen, and natural spell. I'm quoting this kind of 1998 book, Technosis, by Eric Davis here. People are rediscovering mystical impulses at the heart of our advanced technology. In this context, data animism or techno-animism, to use Eric Davis's term, and this book has had like a few lives in a way. When it first came out in 1998, some people thought it was crazy, other people thought it was describing crazy things, but itself was sane, and then it kind of returns and returns, and recently it's returned again, at least in some circles. So I think it's a very interesting analysis of what's going on, and also of the explanation of some of these kind of turns towards the weird, the mystical, in kind of, you know, through a political and social vocabulary. So this data animism can be seen as a psychologically appropriate and imaginatively pragmatic response to the peculiar qualities of a deeply mediated world, to quote Davis. It can also be developed into an ethical stance, I want to suggest. Just as Walter Benjamin saw in early cinema potential for estrangement from, and more importantly, agitation about, the overarching logic of modern industrial capitalism, we can read Gen AI art as creating a new mode of collective experience that can allow us to feel, think, and do things together within our shared techno-social setup, beyond the overarching logic of AI hype driven by big tech. The deployment of AI and art therefore opens up another path of experience and encounter, allowing the audiences to take some steps towards developing a stance that fosters responsibility for and across our digital ecologies. To suggest this is not to clamor for art as a disinterested realm of experience subject to different rules, but rather to recognize the potentiality of alternative modes of seeing and sensing being born from within the technomaterial setup of the infrastructures that power AI art, and that we are all already entangled with today. This approach resists the binary framing of the AI discourse, whereby AI is positioned as either an emancipatory force promising progress and innovation, or more frequently in humanities' accounts as a dystopian apparatus exacerbating inequality, surveillance, and environmental devastation. Of course, both positions are problematic philosophically because they reinforce a static, externalized view of AI rather than admitting the possibility that we are already situated in what artist Helena Sarin has called the AI loop, a state of events that demands different critical positions and tools. Engagements with AI works that acknowledge our material entanglements with the AI loop can open up new theoretical and activist pathways that will reveal the tension between the pixel flow and the sweat flow, with aesthetics extending a bridge to ethics. This is by no means an automatic passage. Is just an emergence of a possibility to see, sense, and eventually understand otherwise, but one that will most likely only be taken up by very few. Importantly, as pointed out by Emmanuel Levinas, a philosopher whose thinking about ethics doesn't rest on any prior fixed values or norms, but entails a constant negotiation over them, ethics must not be mistaken for a serene and peaceful communion of all beings. Rather, it's a dynamic situation of responsibility exerted on me by the other's presence. The other is always before me, spatially and temporally, disrupting my autonomy and demanding a response, which may also take the form of rejection, neglect, or annihilation. And thus, for Levinas, ethics is something inescapable, arising in every encounter with authority. Ethical data animism shouldn't therefore be reduced to an attempt to establish seamless harmony between humans and non-humans in all their digital entanglements. It must instead begin with the insight that any community, and thus any negotiation of values or data flows, is always already haunted by subsumption and violence. Levinas can help us develop an ethics that seeks to reckon with the other's difference by embracing good violence. That's his term, not mine. This gesture acknowledges potential antagonism and conflict on the level of need, desire, and survivability, while calling for the minimization of harm to humans and non-humans alike. Levinas's philosophy of responsibility for the alterity of the other, where the other is implicitly human, needs to be augmented by a wider sense of responsibility for life, in all its tensions and fractures. Many contemporary thinkers of alterity, from Deleuze through to Donna Haraway and Rosie Braidotti, have tracked such ethical responses. But I'd like to bring Bergson's philosophy of duration as an ethical supplement to Levinas's thought. For Bergson, life itself is a ceaseless and creative unfolding, and that is the source of alterity for him. Life is instantiated within a flow, be it of bodies or pixels, resisting capture while making others see and sense liveness, and thus potentially feel alive. By putting Levinas and Bergson in productive tension, ethical data animism can become a method for navigating the strictures and fractures of current digital ecologies. Seen in this context, animist gestures within AI can be read as perpetual responsiveness to unpredictable emergence, but also as taking responsibility on the part of the humans experiencing and embracing such responsiveness to the disruptions that emergence introduces. To sum up, ethical data animism, arising as it does from an aesthetic experience of immersive AI-driven data art that sensibilizes its audiences to alternative experiences and logics without offering any a priori ethical guarantees, can be understood as, one, a relationship of asymmetrical responsibility, rooted in Levinas's notion of infinite responsibility to difference, yet attentive to the ways in which human and non-human others, other humans, flowers, corals, bugs, data networks, resist appropriation and issue demands that counter or even contradict ours. A mode of temporal sensitivity, drawing on Bergson's concept of duration that treats data flows within AI systems as elements of an evolving multiplicity, moving through us and making and unmaking us, rather than as discrete containable entities. And three, as a method for negotiating tensions between competing demands of different others that avoids projecting fantasies of a seamless organicist community while working towards minimizing fractures and forms of violence that will inevitably ensue, with a view to coming out on the side of life, even against all odds. So the focus of such an ethical stance then shifts from inquiring whether AI can make us feel alive to seeking forms of engagement within our digital ecologies that affirm our human responsibility for the constitutive elements and thus for our cohabitability and shared futures. This stance constitutes a minimal ethical imperative. It's not a technocratic promise of the resolution of all biases and conflicts the way AI ethics is typically positioned, nor is it just an ethics of care, because care doesn't carry enough of a reflection on the violence involved in any well-meaning efforts to dispense with it. Rather, it's a pointer towards the ongoing arduous work of living with difference, precarity, and struggle. It's a way of staying with the trouble, quote Haraway, rather than denying or foreclosing it. To articulate in terms of this talk, the uncanny lifelessness of flowers, pixels, and bugs invites us to inhabit the fissures and fractures of techno-modernity while taking on the charge of ethical indeterminacy. Such indeterminacy is more than just a neutral situation of facing multiple equivalent options. It's intrinsically linked with the need to respond to what we talked about at the beginning and what Bembe has termed necropower, relations of sovereignty that decide where, when, and whose life is expected to expire and whose life is allowed to continue. In this sense, to feel alive through the animated pixels and vectors of AI art is to confront the unequal distribution of livability and survivability they point to, while seeking to minimize harm within the conditions of fracture driven by AI technology. And I want to add a postscript to this talk by offering my own contribution to the mechanical flower practice. You know, I'm a philosopher, but I also have an art practice, so I kind of try and do things in different registers for different audiences or for myself, really. This is a recent piece of mine, which is titled Les fleurs du métal, Metal Flowers. And the piece is a remake of Charles Baudelaire's famous collection of symbolist poems, Fleurs du Mal, Flowers of Evil, a key text of European modernity. So my piece reworks these poems and into a non-melancholy, queer, androgynous trip-hop music video, co-produced with various AI models. The piece revisits flowers as mobile, artifactual, communicative. This is like, I'm showing you early things that, didn't make it to the video, but like attempts, and looks at flowers as vital, caressing, threatening all at once. By recasting the symbolist flower in an electronic groove, Le Fleur du Métal embraces a different form of data animism, beyond the masterful and overwhelming narrative of famous modernist texts, from James Joyce's Ulysses through T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. Indeed, the piece plays for, but also with its audience, replaying modernity's concerns in a different key.
In a city of glass and steel, where shadows dance on neon streams, a tale of hearts that dare to feel unfolds within our modern dreams. Mechanical flowers bloom at night, their petals whisper coded songs in gardens lit by pixel light, where we the restless do belong. In gardens lit by pixel light, where we the restless do belong. In gardens lit by pixel light, where we the restless do belong. Through tangled webs of data flow, our spirits wander seeking grace. In currents swift, both high and low, we find our truths in latent space. No boundaries bind our fluid forms in spectra wide. We drift and glide through broadcast and data storms. Our minds are free, no need to hide. A lover's touch, a phantom kiss, electric pulses through the air. In distant realms we seek our bliss, in network vast, beyond compare. Through tangled webs of data flow, our spirits wander seeking grace. In currents swift, both high and low, we find our truths in latent space. Not bound by field, our love expands through circuits fine and screens that gleam. In back end we interlace our hands and walk together through the dream. In gardens lit by pixel light, we find a place to simply be, where time and space blend soft and bright in post-organic serenity. Our gardens grow with pixel blooms, their leaves of data, their roots of wire. In quiet, secret, darkened rooms, they pulse with life, they never tire. Oh Baudelaire, your shadows deep now dance dance in realms of light and code. In whispers soft our secrets keep. In every bite our stories flow. No longer bound by simple shades of black and white, of wrong and right. Our lives are hues in endless grades, a spectrum broad, both day and night. So sing, dear souls, of love and pain, of joy found in the database, impulsing where our hearts remain, and find their truth in the strangest place. When sometimes we're both high and low. This age of glass and steel, where data flows and flowers bloom, our hearts, though scarred, can learn to heal and beat their way out of the darkest gloom.
So I'm going to stop here and say thank you. As Ivona said, I'm quite active in the open access movement, so I can refer you to some of the kind of text references. The latest one is the Perception Machine book that came out open access from the MIT Press, but also I've got a lot of the ideas I publish open access through Open Humanities Press. So some of this is a return to earlier ideas from Minimal Ethics for the Anthropocene, which I think I did in 2014, or a real repudiation and critique of AI art, which I did in a book called AI Art, which I think offended everyone producing AI art at the time. So I feel I got it out of the system, so I'm trying to come at it. And they're all available through AI art. And I use my Insta more as a space for kind of posting a lot of stuff, open access, and a lot of references to my and other people's works that we publish in that way. Thank you so much.